So I'm Joanna Kline, if anybody doesn't know me. And this series I'm teaching for 3 weeks is about online Bible misinformation, so especially on video platforms like YouTube. Part one is going to be about Enoch, this book, First Enoch from the Second Temple period, and the Nephilm. That's all tied in together. I'll explain what that is. It may seem like a fringe and weird topic if you've never heard of it before, but it's not actually. When it comes to online misinformation, it's not that fringe actually. We may, depending on how much time it takes today, part one might stretch into next week as well. We'll see about that. But I just want to acknowledge at the outset, we're at a time that's, a hard transition time for our church. We're at a time that's a hard time for our country, and I had a hard time preparing for this presentation yesterday as I was watching things unfold in my home state, Minnesota, where all my family still is living in St. Paul. So I just want to acknowledge that. I think that what I'm talking about today might not seem directly relevant to things going on in our world, but actually I think there are some points of connection that we may be able to talk about a little bit. But why don't I open us up with a prayer? God, thank you for bringing us together in this place and for this opportunity to be together here at Christ Church. Be with us as a church community, be with the Grays as we go through this transition time. Please be with our country and all of us as we try to love our neighbor. Please give us wisdom about how best to do that in our church, in our communities here, and as citizens of the world. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay, so usually when I'm teaching series here, I'm teaching about, Bible information, like, in a positive sense, true things about the Bible. I've done lots of different series on wisdom literature, on Genesis. I did the David story a long time ago. And so I was trying to think about what to do for this series, if I should do a biblical text. But lately I've been doing some things in my scholarly work and in my classes about misinformation online. And so I thought I would bring that to us here. There's a lot of stuff out there online about the Bible. And so I think as Christians, it's good to be aware of some of this stuff. I think most of us in this room are probably not watching, TikToks about the Nephilm, although maybe some of you are, and that's fine, and I look forward to your contributions in class today. But I can just say from my own experience, a couple years ago, I was reading about how much information young people were getting from TikTok, even things that in the past they might have Googled, they were going to TikTok instead. And so I downloaded the app and I thought, okay, what's going to come up if you just look for something about the Old Testament on TikTok? So I just typed in Old Testament to the search bar, and within 5 or 10 videos, I was getting videos about Antarctica not really being a continent, but being an ice wall around 7 other continents. And that, so it was like a Antarctica conspiracy theory unrelated to the Bible, just from searching Old Testament, just in a few videos. And so I realized, the algorithm connects, and I mean, that's, one point a couple years ago, so I can't say it's totally representative, but I do think the algorithm connects interest in the Bible, maybe especially the Old Testament, with interest in conspiracy theories, and some are Bible related and some are not. And we might think that this is just about young people, but a few weeks ago, some students were giving a presentation in class and they were showing this AI generated video about the Bible. And all my students were laughing at it, and I asked, you all laugh at this AI slop stuff. Is there anybody out there who takes it seriously? And a couple of people in the class said, yeah, my grandparents watch this all the time. So I think, like I said, it's probably not people here, but you may come across people your age, grandkids, it could be really any age, who are consuming information about the Bible online. So we're just going to talk through a few things related to, some of the bigger trends, maybe some of the bigger figures out there that are talking about the Bible. Some of the stuff, there's actually a lot of good stuff about the Bible online too, so it's not all misinformation. Just because it's online, just because it's on TikTok doesn't mean it's misinformation. And so there's usually a spectrum, and also I'll be trying to teach us some actual things along the way. Today we'll be talking about the book of 1 Enoch from the Second Temple period, which is actually a really interesting text. And there will be some like positive information too, besides just the misinformation. I'm interested to hear from you if you've seen anything online about the Bible that you wonder, is it true, or you're sure it's misinformation, or if there's any Bible figures, Bible commentators out there online who you follow. Anybody have experience yet, Denise?
Bible for Normal People.
Oh, Bible for Normal People by Pete Enns.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's and Pete Enns is an actual scholar. So not everybody is going to agree with all his positions, but yeah, he's a pretty big figure in the online evangelical / ex-evangelical.
Scott played college baseball on his team, so just
Nice.
He's a real person.
I talked to him at our conference, Society of Biblical Literature annual conference in November. I talked to him a little bit there. He just published a children's Bible with a bunch of contributors, like dozens of contributors. One of which is Dan McClellan, who's one of the biggest online Bible commentators. So anyway, they had a panel on that. Yeah, and others, things you've seen that are information, misinformation, questions. Yes?
So I recently was trying to understand better a parallel passage from 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles, and there were dramatically different views about it from Christian and Jewish commentators, and I was perplexed at the challenge of resolving those differences. Maybe that's not misinformation or a particularly penetrating insight, but it struck me as odd that something that was not particularly esoteric had significant differences between Midrash commentary and Christian commentary.
I'm not surprised that there would be big differences. Do you remember where you went for some of that information?
I believe it's called
Sepharia? Yeah, Sepharia is the biggest Jewish text website. It's really, really useful with tons of ancient commentaries and modern ones. But yeah, that is something you'll see quickly, that there are lots of different positions and it can be hard to navigate among them. Anyone else?
I find Dan McClellan you mentioned, I follow him.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've struggled with is I think that the work he does, granted he has different views than we do from a personal standpoint,
Yeah.
An educated person and scholar, is that he tries to, I don't know if he does it intentionally, overly detaches the faith element when he talks about the data doesn't,
Right.
the data doesn't, and data over dogma. That's one of his means. I get that and I appreciate that, but I think that there's a lot of folk that have a hard time hearing it from that sort of heartless-ish.
Yeah. We might talk about Dan McClellan. I agree. He's a good scholar in a way, and he does a lot in terms of debunking misinformation. But he's very. He leans very hard into scholars say this and scholars, and it looks like as if there's only a scholarly position, that's the only tenable position, and there's the scholarly position, and then there's a stupid position.
Exactly. So that's my struggle with it. I really appreciate the work that he does.
Yeah.
Particularly when he attacks the misinformation.
Yeah. And you may know he's Mormon. And it's a very weird disconnect for a lot of people, I think, trying to understand how he can be, he said, a Mormon in good standing, and yet kind of tear down a lot of faith-based perspectives on the Bible. So, we may talk about him as the series goes on. Well, I'm happy to hear from you as we go on these next few weeks. If there's something, person or website or question or theme that you want me to cover, definitely get in touch with me and we can talk about it. I'm just going to give you a little taste of what's out there to start out. This is just a little collection of clips from TikTok on First Enoch. Like I said, you might not know right now what First Enoch is, and we're going to talk about that. But it is actually stuff about Enoch is actually like one of the top areas of Bible information online, Bible misinformation online, and it ties in with angels, demons, some end time stuff, aliens in some form of it, and it also ties in with questions about canon formation and things like that. So like I said, it might seem like a fringe thing and a really weird thing, but actually this Enoch stuff is trending, and it touches on a lot of questions that actually aren't really fringe about the Bible. So here's just a little taste. We'll be unpacking some of these ideas as we go on and talking about what Enoch is as we go on.
There's a book older than the flood, older than Moses, written by a man who never died. The book of Enoch. He walked with God, and God took him. Not because he was perfect, but because he saw too much. What did Enoch see? Angels leaving heaven, giants born on earth. A future judgment no one wants to talk about.
Is this prophecy of Enoch actually happening right now? You are not going to believe this. Check out this passage from the Bible, quoting directly the book of Enoch.
The reason why the Jews rejected the book of Enoch, First Enoch, in their canon, is because it testifies of the man they crucified. That's why they rejected it. Full stop. That's why they rejected it.
The more I read this book, the more questions I have. This is what I asked ChatGPT.
Did y'all know that mermaids were in the Bible? Now, this was a highly requested video. Now, let's talk about it. Now, there was a sacred text that was discovered, and it's basically a missing book that was a part of the Bible. And it is called the Book of Enoch. I know a lot of y'all been wanting me to talk about the Book of Enoch on my page for a minute now. And the Book of Enoch talk about mermaids and why throughout history, there have been countless sightings in all type of cultures and countries throughout the world.
Okay, so just a little taste. Like I said, we'll be unpacking some of this and looking and seeing where it comes from as we go on. But to give a little biblical background on where this book of Enoch comes from and what kinds of questions it's getting at, we have to go back to the book of Genesis. So Enoch, the character, is only mentioned one time in the Old Testament. This is a genealogy from Adam to Noah, these 10 generations before the flood in Genesis 5. And it says, when Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after the book of Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more because God took him. And then that's all, it just goes on to the next person in the genealogy. Everyone else in the genealogy, it says that how many years they lived and then until they died. But for Enoch, it doesn't say that he died. It just says that God took him. So it's a very mysterious little text in this genealogy. It's also interesting that he lives 365 days, which is the days of the solar year. Jews in antiquity, many followed a lunar calendar, but some followed a solar or lunisolar calendar. So this might have been notable to people, but it's a mysterious little text, and it kind of leaves people probably wanting more. Like, well, where did God take him to? And in the Old Testament, really, you don't have the idea of people going to heaven. At least not explicitly. You do have Elijah goes up in a chariot of fire into heaven or the sky. But otherwise, when people die, they die. Sometimes it talks about Sheol, which is just kind of the grave, in my view. but all this here with Enoch, you have lots of questions because he was no more because God took him, and you don't get any more information. And then there's another mysterious passage that is really important for the book of Enoch, and that's Genesis 6, 1-4, a really famous, confusing passage. So this is after the genealogy and right before the flood story. It says, when men began to multiply on the face of the ground and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all that they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in mortals forever, for they are flesh. Their days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went into the daughters of men, who bore children to them. These were the heroes that were of old, warriors of renown. And then it just moves on, the passage moves on to talk about people's hearts being evil all the time, and people being violent, and then God choosing Noah and sending the flood. So if you just read this passage, and you might be familiar with it, what questions come up when you see this text? What might you ask about this weird little text? Yes?
I want to know what the translation for the first Genesis is. It says, because God took him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what was the word that they translated as took? Could it have had other meanings? Because if you look at every translation of the Bible, sometimes it's like, how did that translation be the same as this translation?
Yeah.
And so what did, like a word like took might have meant died.
Right. Yes, that's a great point. The word is lakach, which is a normal verb to take.
I love that you know that.
Actually the same, when it says they took wives for themselves in the next passage, same thing. So it's a general word that can be used in lots of different contexts. Some people do think that it's just talking about normal death. That idea that he was no more, it just says Einenu, he was not, which is it's the same word like when Jacob talks about Joseph, who he thinks is dead, he says Joseph is not, and he thinks he's dead. So some people do think that God took him in death, and that it's notable because he dies younger than everybody else in the genealogy. Everybody else is living like 800-900 years, and he only lives for 365 years. So yeah, the word itself doesn't really give us more of a clue in this case, but it could mean that God took him in death. Some people do interpret it that way. But it's weird that it departs from the normal pattern of everybody else. It explicitly says he died, he died, he died. This one doesn't say explicitly he died. Bruce?
Maybe you're familiar with Michael Heiser's work on Nephilm. I find him kind of interesting. But the sons of God in this passage, he says, is Elohim. So it's the council, the divine council, these divine beings.
Sorry.
Are we okay?
Yep.
We often think of angels as always being angels, but he makes the point that an angel is a role, a messenger.
Yeah.
And the Nephilim are these sort of offspring of divine beings and human beings, and it's an abomination.
Yeah, Michael Heiser is like a huge figure in this space. He passed away a couple years ago, his work I find interesting too. I personally think he connects more dots between biblical passages than always, in my view, should be connected. But he's addressing a big question is, who are the sons of God? And it's B'nai Elohim. So the Elohim is translated God usually, but B'nai Elohim, anytime any other place in the Bible that you see it, and it doesn't occur that many times, but like in the book of Job, it says that the sons of God came and presented themselves before God at the beginning of the book of Job. Every other time it occurs, it's clearly a divine being. We might call it angel, but angel in the Bible is a particular messenger role. The word for angel means a messenger. Sometimes it's human, sometimes it's divine. But sons of God seems to be some kind of divine being. Other interpretations of this passage exist. So some people think the sons of God are human kings, because in the ancient world, kings could have this conception of themselves as gods. So some people think it's just human kings who are marrying women. Some people argue that it's the line of Seth. So Adam, the line of Adam's son Seth, marrying women from Cain's line. So those are kind of the other two interpretations. I think the best interpretation is the one Heiser would say, that sons of God are divine beings. And then the idea that the Nephilim are the offspring of these divine beings and human women is the most common interpretation of the passage. But it's also interesting that that's not laid out super straightforwardly. So, it says that the sons of God married the daughters of men, and then it says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when this was going on, when the sons of God were getting together with the daughters of men, the Nephilim were the heroes of old, warriors of renown. So it actually doesn't super explicitly say that the Nephilim are the offspring. I think you can interpret it that way, and many people have since ancient times. But it could also just be that, okay, the Nephilim are another group of people that are around. We only have one other occurrence in the Bible probably of the Nephilim, and that is in Numbers, when the spies the Israelites are in the wilderness, the spies go in to spy out the land, and the 12 spies go into the land, and they see the Nephilim, and it says, we saw the Nephilim, and we were like grasshoppers in their eyes. So in that passage in Numbers, the Nephilim must be big, because the people say, we're like grasshoppers in their eyes. And you also have other groups that look like giants in the land of Canaan before the Israelites come in, like the Anakim and King Og of Bashan, whose bed is said to be huge. He's Rephaim is huge, but he seems to be a giant. So anyway, even going back to the Septuagint, the Greek translation of this from ancient times translates Nephilim giants in here. So some of your Bibles might even say giants instead of Nephilim. But there's nothing here that says they're giants. It says they're heroes, but the giant part comes from associated with the book of Numbers. So anyway, anyone else have questions from this passage or comments? Yeah, Denise.
There's another set. There are other sets of people that are just dropped into Genesis 6, or other sets of beings. It's there's no mention of them before.
Yeah.
That's just
where is this coming from? Yeah.
If we don't have mermaids, I'm gonna be disappointed. I'm just saying.
Yeah, the mermaids are in for Enoch. I can explain it in a minute. This seems to come out of nowhere. After this, the text just kind of goes on. It's a very mysterious passage, and I think to me, this is just my take on kind of both of these. Is that this is Genesis 1 through 11, all through all those chapters. There are lots of points of connection with other ancient Near Eastern material. So the flood, there's multiple flood stories from the ancient Near East. There's creation stories from the ancient Near East that have points of connection. And then there's stories from the ancient Near East about demigods, about part god, part human figures like Gilgamesh, who is a hero of old. And in some of these stories, the demigods are ones who teach technology to humans. Give them tools for metalworking and things like that. Interestingly, in the Bible, the line of Cain is the one who's coming up with those technologies, so just a purely human line. In my view, this is just a kind of little, and there's even a figure in one Mesopotamian text of, I think it might be Sumerian king list, where there's a seventh figure in a genealogy who's taken to heaven. And it's not, the figure isn't named Enoch, but it is a seventh figure in a list who says he's taken to heaven, and it's before a flood. You also have long lives in Sumerian king lists, really long lives before the flood. The Sumerian king they're said to live tens of thousands of years, and then lifespans look shorter after the flood, which is something in the Bible. So I don't know. In my view, the Bible is kind of, it's saying okay, you've heard of these demigods, you've heard of these heroes. Yeah, they're around. We know, but moving right along. The kind of short nature of this, and even the cryptic nature, is kind of an acknowledgement that yeah, we've heard the stories, but actually they're not as important as, say, the evil in human hearts that we'll go on to talk about in the flood, that the flood story goes on to talk about. I don't know if I'm right about that, and people who are super into First Enoch would disagree. But I think the Bible is almost trying to downplay some of this. And it puts it in overall a negative cast. It's before the flood. It seems to be part of this kind of lead up to the flood. These heroes of old, men of renown, they're not really that remembered. Like, it's kind of ironic. They're heroes of old, men of renown, and then we move right along. And it's the men of renown, warriors of renown, it means literally men of name. And that word name is really played on throughout these narratives. So these are people who, they want to make a name for themselves. It's just like what's said about the people building the Tower of Babel. We were to make a name for ourselves. And Noah's son Shem, that word Shem means name. And then, so you get all this name, people making names for themselves. And then in Genesis 12, God calls Abraham and God says, I'm going to make your name great. So instead of trying to make a name for themselves, trying to be great heroes, which is basically a failed enterprise, you have this line of Shem leading to Abraham, who God makes a great name for, instead of him trying to make a great name for himself. That's kind of other thing. So anyway, there's lots to be said about this, but people in ancient times had all these questions too. And so before people were writing Bible commentaries and things like that, people wrote literature, often there's a genre called rewritten scripture, so they'd often retell biblical stories in order to interpret them. Sometimes those retellings were in the voice of a character in the scriptures, and that's what pseudepigraphy is, when something is falsely ascribed to a character. In this time period, I think the Second Temple time period, in my view, it's not a kind of dishonest pseudepigraphy, like, we're trying to really, or whoever was originally writing this wasn't necessarily like if they're writing in the voice of Enoch, trying to deceive people that they were really Enoch. Maybe they were, I don't really know. But I think it was just a way of inhabiting that world and telling the stories in order to interpret them. So First Enoch, some people, when they're trying to explain what it is, in modern terms they call it fan fiction. So it's like somebody looks at this story of Enoch and the sons of God, daughters of men, and writes this whole huge expansion of it, at least that's what part of the book of First Enoch is, to try to understand it better and to try to relate it to what's going on in their own times. So First Enoch, this book, it's one book, but it really came together over a long period of time. It has 5 main different parts. The one that gets talked about the most online is the Book of the Watchers, and that's what's this expansion of the Enoch story, the Enoch and the Genesis 6 story. So most people would call these apocalyptic texts. They deal with the end times and kind of the unfolding of history. It's a revelatory work. Written probably starting in the late 4th century BC to the turn of the era, so to around the first century BC or AD, BCE, CE. And most people think it was written in Aramaic originally. How we knew about this book originally, before the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, the book was, and still, the only full form of the book exists in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon. It's in that canon, it's in the language Gaz, Ethiopic language, and that was translated from a Greek copy, which was translated from the Aramaic probably. So that's if you look online and find the full version, like in the full English version of First Enoch, it's been translated from Gaz, and it's because it was in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon, which is a much more expansive canon than any other Christian group has. So they have lots more books. I'm not sure, I don't know enough about their church or their canonization philosophy to understand what, how they view all the books in their canon. Are there rankings or anything? But it's just a much more expansive canon than other canons. It was fragments. A lot of fragments were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. So the Dead Sea Scrolls discovered what was it? 60? No, more than almost a long time ago. 48. Collection of Jewish texts at Qumran. There's almost every text from the Old Testament there, not Esther, or fragments of lots of texts. And then there's texts that were produced by the community, probably produced by the community living there, a sectarian group. And then there's also other texts like Enoch. The people living there at Qumran probably didn't produce this. It seems to have a wider reach, but they were definitely using it. There's, I think, at least 11 copies of parts of this manuscript that have been found at Qumran, but not the whole book. An interesting thing for Christians is that the book is quoted in the book of Jude. It says, Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about them. He's talking about rebellious people. See, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands in his holy one, of his holy ones to judge everyone. And it goes on. The quote goes on. And there's other references that look like they're referring to events in 1st Enoch about spirits in prison in Jude and 2nd Peter, for example. So it seems like at least some of the New Testament authors were familiar with the book or using the book. I'm just going to show you some excerpts from it so you can see what this book is about. This is from the Book of the Watchers, and you can see how these people in this time, Second Temple period, are interpreting and expanding on what was here in this story in Genesis 6. So it says, when the sons of men had multiplied in those days, beautiful and comely daughters were born to them. And the watchers, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. So already we have these, the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God, called watchers, which is a term from Daniel that's used about angels. So they're definitely identifying these sons of God as divine beings and not as human figures. In the text, it goes on to name all these angels who were involved, all these divine beings who were involved, who go down to earth. And it says, these and the others with them took for themselves wives from among them, such as they chose. They began to go into them and to defile themselves through them, and to teach them sorcery and charms, and to reveal to them the cutting of roots and plants. And they conceived from them and bore to them great giants. And the giants begot Nephilm, and to the Nephilm were born Eliud. So, again, you can see an expansion of the story. Not only are the divine beings getting together with human women, but they're also teaching them all these things. So sorcery and charms and magic and stuff like that. They're teaching them all this technology. That's not in the Genesis text, but it is in other ancient Egyptian texts, and also some Greek myths and stuff too about gods and demigods teaching humans technology. And then it explicitly connects the Nephilim with the offspring of these people, although there's multiple generations, great giants, Nephilim, Eliud, so it seems to be kind of generations of giants. And then what happens is you have all these giants running around who are half god, half human, and they were devouring the labor of the sons of men, and men were not able to supply them. And the giants began to kill men and devour them. And they began to sin against the birds and beasts and creeping things and the fish, and to devour one another's flesh. And they drank the blood. Then the earth brought accusation against the lawless ones. So these are the giants who are doing all these things. And in the book of Enoch, it's really these giants, or Nephilim, or whatever you want to call them, who are the reason for the flood. It's not just the normal guy going about his business. It's these giants that are going around, drinking blood and devouring the work of humans and things like that. That's why God has to destroy the earth, which in some ways is, a little more stomachable in a way than God destroying all of the earth because of people. Here, God is destroying the earth because of these giants who are wreaking havoc on the earth. It goes on and it talks more about the things that were taught to the humans. So there's this watcher called Asael who taught men to make swords of iron and weapons and shields and breastplates and every instrument of war. There's a long list of what the different watchers taught humans. And then there's a kind of turning point when you have these archangels who look down from heaven and see what's going on. So Michael and Sariel and Raphael and Gabriel looked down from the sanctuary of heaven upon the earth and saw much bloodshed on the earth. And so then they raise this cry on behalf of people because the giants are destroying the earth. And so then God takes action. It says, the Most High declared and the Great Holy One spoke. To Raphael he said, go Raphael and bind Asael hand and foot and cast him into the darkness. So Raphael's got Asael, the watcher, bound up, going to bind him up in the earth. To Gabriel he said, go Gabriel to the half-breeds, the sons of miscegenation, and destroy the sons of the watchers from among the sons of men. I should say sons, not songs. And to Michael he said, go Michael, bind Shemi-Haza, that's another rebellious watcher, and the others with him, bind them for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth until the days of judgment. So basically, the archangels go bind up the watchers. These are the rebellious angels, divine beings in the earth, and they're awaiting judgment. And then it's basically the flood, along with the angels who destroy the giants. And just one more page to get a feeling for what's going on here. So here's where Enoch comes in. It says, before these things, Enoch was taken. No human being knew where he had been taken, nor where he was, or what happened to him. His works were with the watchers, and with the holy ones were his days. So in this text, Enoch has like a special view on this because he's been taken to heaven. So he sees all this stuff and more. In the book of Luminaries, God or angels take him on a tour of the cosmos, basically, and he sees all these secret places, and he sees how the sun rises and all the movement of the astral bodies and stuff like that. But in terms of this instance, it says, I, Enoch, was standing, blessing the Lord of majesty, the King of all ages, and look, the watchers of the great Holy One called to me, Enoch the scribe, and said to me, Enoch, righteous scribe, go and say to the watchers of heaven who forsook the highest heaven, you will have no peace or forgiveness. So Enoch, he has to be a scribe, I guess, because he wrote this book, this very long book. So Enoch goes to the watchers and kind of preaches to them and preaches this message of judgment. They actually send a message back to God through Enoch asking for forgiveness, but that's denied. They're not going to get forgiveness. And then so Enoch kind of ends up as this mediator between the watchers and the fallen watchers and God. And then this is just a description of what happens to the giants. So it says, now the giants who were begotten by the spirits in flesh, they will call them evil spirits on the earth, for their dwelling will be on earth. The spirits that have gone forth from the body of their flesh are evil spirits, for from humans they came into being, and from the holy watchers was their origin of creation. So basically, according to the book of Enoch, you have these rebellious divine beings who are bound up in the earth awaiting judgment, and then the giants, who are their offspring, are killed. The Nephilm and the giants are killed in the flood, but their spirits have to still stay on earth because they're half divine, but they're half human, and so their spirits are bound to the earth. So these are evil spirits that are on the earth tormenting people, the spirits of the dead giants. So that's basically kind of the spiritual worldview, spiritual being worldview of the text of Enoch. The mermaids, I'm pretty sure, come from the women who got together with them, with the divine beings. They're turned into sirens, and that's interpreted as mermaids. So they're turned into these sea creatures because they had sex with the divine being. So that's their fate, I guess. That's where the mermaids come in. It's only a minor detail in the book of Enoch. But
These silly gods are not going to have sex with men. That's for sure.
So before I go on to some online claims about this, any questions or responses to this? These are just little pieces from one part of the book of Enoch. There's a lot more to it, and you can find it online if you want to read it. Although it was banned from the Bible, you can find it. But we'll talk about that. Any questions or responses before I go on? Abby?
So I would know Madeline Langle and Franklin Time,
Mm-hmm.
where she's written, in that series, she's written an entire, if you haven't read it, an entire novel about this passage.
Oh, really? Oh, I'll have to check it out. What's it called?
I don't know, it's one of them.
Okay.
Could you repeat the question?
The trilogy that's
She said Madeline Langle wrote a whole book based on this.
Yeah, and, so the way she thinks about it is that the sons of men that stay, the warriors of great renown,
Mm-hmm.
it's two factions of angels, and the bad ones, they did what they did, and then the warriors of great renown
Mm-hmm.
were the ones that were staying and protecting.
Okay. Also the Noah movie, directed by Darren Aronofsky, sort of 10 years old at this point, as Russell Crowe is in it. This has this kind of riffs on that. It has these big rock monsters that are the Watchers, and so the Watchers have been not just imprisoned in the earth. They've literally been imprisoned in rocks, and so they're these big lumbering rock monsters. But they actually kind of turn out to be good. I love that movie. Anyway, so that's enough. There's lots of cultural riffs on this idea. Yeah. Go ahead, Pete.
So last week we talked about Screw Tape Letters from
Mm-hmm.
C.S. Lewis, and I guess my question is, do we at Christ Church believe that angels and demons exist?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So let me show of hands. Let me put these up and so yes, I do think it's someone like Michael Heiser. One of his main goals is to convince Christians that those kinds of beings do exist, and to bring back a kind of spiritual, to the openness to understanding that there are spiritual beings, that those are an important part of the Bible, and that they're still around. I think obviously Christians are going to put different amounts of emphasis on those, those kinds of things, and different amounts of like explanation to them. I think the stuff online, and Heiser to a certain extent, goes into kind of a maximalist, like leaning in on the spiritual beings side. Other people give it a, either just ignore it, deny it, or minimize it.
Or embarrassed by it.
Or embarrassed by it, yeah. So, I mean, I think, to me, I think, most Christians over time have believed in angels and demons and a spiritual reality, and real spiritual beings that aren't just representative of like evil powers or something. To me, the danger comes in when we try to get too specific about what those are. And also, I think, and this is true of the Enoch stuff, some of the Enoch stuff, try to blame most of our problems on external evil beings. That kind of takes the focus off whatever is our own responsibility. Yeah, Nick.
Okay, yeah, so it feels a little bit, and this maybe sounds a little skeptical, like it's kind of a way of explaining why there's evil in the world, and justify God's goodness.
Yeah.
It can't be from God, it must be these other sources.
Right.
Do you think that
Absolutely, and it's a point I even have later. I do think like this all comes back to the problem of evil.
Yeah.
And I think, one way to solve it is to put more emphasis on antagonistic powers. And that solves one problem, and then it kind of creates other ones. In the Old Testament as a whole, the emphasis is on God's overall power. Even God sends harmful, or you could translate it, evil spirits, like to Saul. There's more of a picture of everything under God's power. Then the problem is, well, why? How could God cause harm? If God is in control, why did all these evil things happen? So if you have a kind of maximalist, but then there's also the issue of evil coming from human hearts. That's also an Old Testament answer to the problem of evil, and I think that's more of an answer. So if you look at the flood story, you get this little blip of sons of God, daughters of men, Nephilm. And then it goes on to talk about people are evil, that every inclination of their heart is evil, and they're violent, and things like that. It puts more emphasis on people than on spiritual powers, or even, some outside forces that are coming in.
The legal book is titled Many Waters.
Okay.
It's considered a part of the time, it was initially Mellon Lingle wrote a time trilogy.
Okay.
This is considered book number 4. There's also a 5th book, and it's now the Time Quintet.
Okay.
Third book is my favorite, and I reread it about 10,000 times in high school and college. That's the one I recommend.
Okay. So Many Waters by Madeline L'Engle is the book that Abby was talking about. Kristen?
Yeah, I'm also struck by the role of the women in this narrative, that they're seen, they're passive in a way, and just sort of taken, but then also perhaps like, they're beautiful, but then they're like part of the trouble.
Yeah, and there's actually been like a lot of discussion in certain circles of where, like, are the daughters of men complicit? Are they taken in the sense of kidnapped into marriage? Are they, but I think something that struck me reading First Enoch was, it is like the spiritual beings are all male, and they aren't really like supposed to be sexual beings, but they are male, and they're all male figures. So it even more than the biblical picture, I think, puts the kind of male, human, and divine figures as more uniformly male, with the women as just even more of kind of marginal figures who are just acted upon. Yeah. Yes?
And so when the women have sex with these spiritual beings, they're punished because it's always the woman's fault.
Yeah, they're in First Enoch they are, yeah. Yes, Aaron.
One of the things that strikes me in the manner that I grew up, which is pre-internet, pre-meme, pre-conspiracy theory.
Well, there were conspiracy theories back then.
It's easily viral regardless.
Yeah,
I grew up in a church where my summer, if anybody knows the name of this book, I'll be surprised, but my summer book report, where my dad was to read this presentation.
Oh, yeah. That's
right. Frank Ready, yeah, exactly. So I grew up in this culture of sort of fundamentalist, Jesus, free, hippie, separation from sort of common society, strong belief in spiritual warfare. The term spiritual warfare was a buzzword in the 80s where I attended church. And it reminds me of sort of how we cycle in and out of things.
Yeah.
Just we continually cycle in and out of things. And I've watched, I'm a fan of Kline. I've seen the book of like all of these things sort of develop and envelop people in a distraction.
Yeah, it's actually, I've seen, I mean, a lot of the stuff online is recycled stuff that was around from before this. And the alien side of this, one of faculty, this is used in the context of ancient aliens sometimes, that the idea of the Watchers are actually aliens. So, but one of my colleagues came up, I talked about this just a few days ago at a faculty forum, and one of my colleagues came up and said that his mom used to bring him to all these lectures and events for this guy who wrote this book, Chariots of the Gods. He just died. I saw his obituary in the Globe. I think his name is Eric von Daniken. Anyway, and this is around decades ago, that this idea of ancient aliens. But there's other versions of it within Christianity, and a lot of the stuff that's not this also is kind of resurrected Bible code and stuff like that. That's been around for a while. Let me just say some of the online claims, and we'll see if we have time for another video. So, one claim sometimes is that the book of First Enoch was written actually by Enoch. Some people online say this, some people don't claim it, but there's really no way we could have a book like from this time period, even if you kind of take it in a straightforward way with the flood. We don't have any literature from Abraham's time, much less from some ancient time before Abraham. I mean, literature maybe, biblical texts and texts from land of Canaan and stuff we don't have. So the idea that somebody could write this and have it be passed along through all this time is just, it's not very plausible. Another claim is that it was removed or banned from the canon, and you already saw some of that in the video. In the Christian world, it's common to use the book to explain the origins of demons and evil spirits, and this is something that it is just for Christians reading the Bible. Like I said, in the Old Testament, there really aren't a lot of demons or evil spirits. It's only very occasionally. You hardly have Satan, and arguably you don't have Satan in the form that you see Satan in the New Testament really at all. And then you come to the New Testament, and there's all these, unclean spirits, and Jesus casting out these demons and things like that. And so it is hard to understand how you get from the Old Testament picture of spiritual beings to the New Testament. And so a lot of people use Enoch as, people even say, the Rosetta Stone for understanding the Bible. It makes everything kind of fall into place if the demons are from if the demons are the spirits of the Nephilim who died. That explains where they came from. And then there's the ancient alien stuff, and this is, like I said, the Watchers. The Watchers are really aliens, and there's related theories about these continuing Nephilim bloodlines and giant. This intersects some with Smithsonian conspiracy theories. People think that the Smithsonian is hiding a bunch of artifacts like giant bones and stuff like that. Less often, but still used, is a flat Earth, because so people who are into flat Earth will go to Enoch because Enoch saw all these portals. So people will have you can see videos with the diagram of a flat Earth, the sun, and then they're reading along with Enoch and showing okay, the sun goes through this portal and goes down here, and because Enoch saw all these secrets back then. I'll just show you a few banned from the Bible clips. And then we'll pick up the rest next time. But this idea that Enoch was banned from the Bible, you can see here.
We've been told that the Book of Enoch was taken out in the 4th century because it wasn't accurate to the original scriptures. But what if that wasn't the case? What if it was because it told the truth about humanity?
So why don't we hear about this? Why isn't this part of your Bible? Why isn't it taught in Sunday school or preached from pulpits around the world? Why is this part of the story, this ancient, world-altering truth, missing? Because the Book of Enoch wasn't just forgotten. It was banned, deliberately. It was cast out by religious authorities, branded as heretical, pushed into the shadows.
Powerful man, because he's talked about in the Bible, yet his book is not in the Bible. It was left out by accident on purpose. And the reason why is because he's talking about, and he calls these beings by their names, beings that were not from earth, that came here from up above and engaged mankind.
Okay, so that's very common, this idea that Enoch was banned from the Bible, and this is, you see this with some other stuff too, that you could look with New Testament, other Gospels and things like that. Anybody want to have heard this or want to respond to this idea about things being banned from the Bible? I had a student ask me this just at the end of class last semester. Like, her math teacher from high school was telling her Enoch was banned from the Bible, and so this is actually, like I said, it's not that fringe. It's kind of widespread. I think part of the difficulty here, and I'll just end on this, is that there's a lot we don't know about the canonization process, especially for the Old Testament. We just don't. We can only infer things from, say, the text we have in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the texts that are cited in the New Testament. We have some statements, like by Josephus, the Jewish historian. He gives a number of books that are in the canon and some different categories, or I don't want to use the word canon, but the books that have been accepted by Jews. But he doesn't actually list them all, and so it's even with Josephus's numbers, it's hard to say exactly what's in there. And so I think there's this idea that kind of based on things that happen in the 4th century, that a powerful council of people got together and they threw out this book because they didn't like it, or it was too dangerous, or and they accepted this book because it advanced their interests. But really, like I said, there's a lot we don't know. But things get canonized because communities are using them. Overall, it's more of a ground up process than people from the ground up than people sometimes will make it out to be. I think the hard thing with Enoch, I think, is that people were using this book in the time of Jesus. We find it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. We see Jude quoting it. Eventually, Jews don't canonize it, and almost no Christian groups canonize it. But it is being used, and I think my view is that in the time of Christ, most Jews have a core of books that's the same as what Jews and Christians have today. But around the edges, people have some differences. So there's no Esther found at the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example. We do have people using First Enoch. And so some people, everybody has the same core books, and that's what we see used and quoted over and over in the New Testament. But there are some differences around the edges. And that also accounts for differences between the Catholic and Protestant and Orthodox canons today, and Jewish, why things got canonized a little bit differently. But most of those books are concerned books that I see as kind of those around the edges type of books that there were little differences about. But overall, the overall witness of Jewish communities and Christian communities is that the book should not be canonized, even though Jews were using it. And it's a very, very useful book. And I'm grateful for that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church canonized it, because it is a very useful book to understand what Jews, how they were interpreting Scripture, how they were seeing the world in that time. So it is a complicated situation, which is why people can sometimes make these extreme claims. But nobody banned it from the Bible, in my view. It was not canonized because the communities weren't using it by the time that the canon was solidified. All right, so we're out of time for today. I'm happy to take more questions. We'll probably pick up on this topic next time because there's a few more things I want to say. But like I said, be in touch if you have other topics that you want to discuss. And thank you.